Welcome back to Dominique Medici Art Academy. It's day 12, and today we continue with our gradient scale. In the last lesson, we started the gradient scale focusing mostly in the darker values. Today, we continue working into the lighter values. Let's get right into it. In our last lesson, we worked from 7 through 11, laying in each value across each value step, and then gradually gradating out from the center of each value. And it's just beginning to give us the feeling or the sense of that gradient developing. In today's lesson, we're going to go from 7 hopefully to 2 or 1. We'll see how far we get. And then we'll see that gradient developing much further. So the real importance behind doing this, just a reminder, is we want to be able to bring this level of control and subtlety to our drawing. And the first way to do it is to do it in abstract, right? Everything we're ever going to draw is a combination of value and some degree of blending. So if we can do these 2 steps in abstract, plus an additional step of edges, which we'll talk about later, well, then technically we can do anything. We can render anything. So this is the foundation, which is, again, why we go slow. We take it nice and easy, and really take care that we do this exercise well, right? It will, the more care we give to this earlier stage, the easier subsequent stages will be. Okay, so let's get right into it. Here we have our 6, and just as a reminder, what we did is we marked out our values from above, right? It's lined up directly underneath the value scale. I marked out all of the value steps, and then I'm also writing in the numbers for each of these. Okay, so there we have it. And at the center of each one of these values, we shaded in the value as it is above. Because in the center, it's really the only place where it's full strength. Beyond the center, it's getting darker as it moves towards the darks. And then beyond the center to the left, it's getting lighter as we move towards the left, or towards the white. So by placing a little value in each one of these, it gives us a good place to start. So let's continue on from what we did the previous lesson. And what we were saying is that everything from 6 to 7 is at least, right, from the center of 6 to the center of 7, it's at least as dark as 6. So the first thing we can do is just shade in that whole space up to a 6. And in this case, I'm using an HB. As we begin to get closer to these lighter values, we want to use RHB, right? It's lighter, it lays down less graphite. We have a little more control as it's building up. Right, we have a little less leeway in the sense that with the darks, if you just keep working it and laying on more, usually we can kind of like even it up. With the lights, it's not a matter of just continuously laying on more and more graphite, right? Because if we keep doing that, it gets too dark, or it gets too smudgy or too blotchy. So we have to go a little slower. And right, just a reminder, so if we make one pass with the pencil held at a certain angle, right? And then our second pass will be just holding the pencil at a slightly different angle so that we're not kind of developing grooves in the paper. We're distributing the stroke and the pressure across the paper as evenly as possible, right? Which, again, we're trying to create a pattern and texture that's even, so it makes sense to apply it in the same way. So I'm building it up slowly, slowly, pass by pass. So we use the 6 from above as a reference for how dark our 6 needs to be. Now, it looks okay in this area, but for sure we need to darken. Right, so we also talked about leaning back, or standing back is even better, so that you get a more objective view. And the issues in our drawing, the mistakes, they're always so much more obvious from a slight distance, right? Okay, so maybe we're close to 6 at this point. Now 7 itself, right? So this is 7 here. It looks like it could be established a little darker, right? Again, right through the center of the 7 is where we get our true 7. It could be just a little darker, a little more uniform. So a lot of what we are doing is we're training ourselves to see, right? I mean, before this lesson or these past few lessons, if we saw each one of these different values, would we have really seen the difference between each one of them? I mean, one of the ideas is that as we do this kind of exercise, especially the gradient, we become so aware of slight changes between things. And then when we start looking at what we're working on, we see things that we maybe didn't even see before. And it's not that they weren't there, but our eyes and our observation, it wasn't tuned to see it, right? So we become way more subtle in the way we perceive. And this is a wonderful feeling. I mean, it really just opens up a lot of space, right? Like a sense of internal space, because the perception grows. So this is another one of the reasons, these lessons, or just art lessons in general, they have this way of expanding our minds, right? And I don't know if you're like me, but I'm guessing you probably are, that when your mind expands, right, whenever it kind of opens up a bit, it also opens up something in here, right? It creates a sense of awe or inspiration. There's something that responds. It sparks. It gets warmer. It feels quieter. Feels calmer, right? And I think like that's what we want. That's what we're looking for in whatever it is we're doing. And if art is your pathway, right, then these skills have that potential. So this is why they're worth cultivating. And it's why it's also worth like seeking out people who also are interested in those same things. So yeah, it's a wonderful journey. And I'm glad we're on it together, right? So let's take a look here. Now the 7, it's looking pretty good. See, this looks more like the 7. Looks much more like the 7. Now, of course, becoming aware that this is too light in between because this looks more like 6, right? But this is what we start to become aware of once we start laying in these midtones, right? So you could say like from 8 to 11 is dark, or constitutes our dark values, maybe really even from 7. And then say, 7 to 4 is our midtone range, and then 4 to 1 is our light. There's a little bit of overlap. But as we grow the scale, we just start seeing so much more. Right? That's the idea. So I'm just going to lay in just a couple of passes across the 7. So you'll notice I just jumped around and popped in a couple things. A limited amount of that I think is okay, but it's a bit risky and it's a bit, I really shouldn't do it. And the reason is because we will just be distracted by that stuff. And we're very much working with the process. And there's a whole step that's dedicated to kind of evening things up, refining. So from that point of view, it's probably worth not letting yourself get distracted. But that's much easier to do knowing that we're going to address all that stuff later, right? So the reason I say that is because it seems like it's important to catch those things when you see them. But when you start doing it, it can start throwing off the scale itself, right? Even if there's some blemishes, because of our process, our scale will definitely work. It might be a little wonky here and there, but it's totally going to work. If we start messing around and evening things up, we're probably not keeping in mind our steps. And we're probably not working with the kind of process or discipline that we have been laying them in. So there's that risk of losing the progress that we're making, even though we think we're trying to make it better. So this is where like trust in that process kind of comes in. Okay, we have our 6, we have our 7 evened up. Now we're going to do the same thing, right? You're getting used to the pattern at this point. We have our 7. Now we're going to go from the middle of 7 to the edge between 6 and 7. We're going to do one full pass. Now, because it's only one full pass, right? It shouldn't make too much of a distinct line. As we're getting into these lighter values, that might start becoming more noticeable, and we might start getting this feeling of bands. It's okay. Just be aware of it. We might just have to ease up on the pressure as we're working towards that line with those passes. Second pass, coming halfway, right, from the 7 to the line. Okay, third pass, quarter. Right, again, you'll definitely see this band of the 7 still showing up. So we're going to need to, probably do another pass from 7 to 8, and then from 8 to 9. But again, let's not worry too much about that right now. Right, we were working a little bit better in the darks. Now that we're getting into the mids, there's a little bit of, I don't think I didn't quite do that 7 well enough. What I really could do is just do one more pass just to try and even up between 7 and 8, getting that 7 fully established. That helps. That definitely helps, right? One pass there does the trick. There's a little bit of light on the bottom here. Now again, this is not so much a refinement, but more like that's really what should have happened in that 7 step, right? The 6 definitely is working. I mean, again, needs to be refined, but it's working. So you can see this gradient developing, which is cool, right? All right, let's keep going. So again, same idea from 5 to 6. Everything we see between there is at least 5. You might start finding it gets a little bit harder to keep the pattern consistent and even. So a nice sharp pencil is always a good idea. Going slower. Again, am I noticing that I'm tending to rush this a little bit? This is another interesting thing, which is that we typically will, when we're judging a value, right, one of the things we're not usually appreciating is that we're always seeing it in relation to another one, some other thing, right? We're not, I mean, things don't exist by themselves, right? Everything's always a relationship. So depending on, like, even the color difference between the pencil, which is warmer, right? It's a little more yellow, and the print is slightly bluer. Even that perceived difference between cool and warm can throw us off. We might tend to read the warmer value. One thing is closer to us, and that this maybe feels further away. Or we might read it lighter or darker. So color influences the way we see value. This is one of the reasons it's so important to work on value by itself as its own thing. Right? So this is traditionally in the atelier system, the way that we would study is like the way I was trained. The first year we did nothing but drawing, right? Nothing else, just drawing with charcoal, pencil, colored pencils, right? That's it. And the idea was we were just trying to understand value and proportion. And with the idea that, right, drawing is the foundation for everything else, absolutely everything. When it comes to traditional representational art, of course. Right, for other art forms, it's probably not as important, and as other art forms have their own aims. But for representational, traditional fine art, which is, that's what I'm teaching, yeah, for sure, right? Like it's essential. And it's why it really is important to devote the time, right? Every other step of the way is entirely dependent on a good foundation in drawing and painting. Doesn't mean you have to just like perfect it, because it's an ongoing process, right? But some facility is essential. So that's what we're doing. We're getting comfortable with these ideas. We're getting some practice in, right? We've worked on our first still life up to this point. We had a workshop where we composed a drawing. And if you haven't taken month 1 of the Academy yet, I definitely totally recommend doing it, right? We talked about this in the last lesson, that because it's interactive, you just get a lot more out of it, right? I mean, I think these recorded lessons are great, right? Of course. You can get so much from them. But there's something about working live within a group, having the ability to ask questions. It's just much more dynamic. So a couple of workshops coming up in January. Both month 1 and month 2 are scheduled. So take it. All right, so there we have it. Our 5 is looking pretty consistent from 5 to 6. And I'm just noticing a couple of blotches in my 5. I'll just take those out with my kneaded eraser. See, that kind of refinement I think is okay because it's the step we're at and it just helps this 5 read better, right? But like this kind of stuff, if I'd caught it earlier, it'd be fine, but don't start fixing stuff at this stage. This is great. This really works nice. My 6, I feel, is a little light through the actual... See, now that I have the 5 in and I'm not reading the 5 against white. So for example, this is what I was talking about earlier. So my 6 looked fine before. And that's because on the one side I was reading it against dark, and on the other side I was reading it against white. So it looked dark because of the contrast next to the white. Now that I have the 5 in though, the core of the 6 looks too light actually. It looks like 5, right? That's one of the things. So contrast tends to throw us off as far as how we read a value. We may read it too light or too dark, depending what it's next to. And color as well can throw us off. So this is why we really just got to get a good handle on value so that we still might get thrown off a little, but very, it's within a kind of degree of tolerance that is manageable. Right, so I'm just going to bring up my 6. And it's so obvious now that I have the 5 in that it needed to be a little stronger. Not much, just a little. Okay, that looks more like it. Okay, now same idea. 5 to 6. Here's our edge between 5 and 6. We're going to do a pass out from the center of 6, going all the way to that edge, but no further, right? We don't want that 6 inside the 5 value rectangle. And then we'll do halfway. And we'll do a quarter. Now that should create a little bit of a gradient. Yeah, see that 6 is still, it's very light right here. Down here is actually good. I'm going to just do that since I was literally just there. Just even it up a touch. That helps. Okay, that gradient's beginning to develop, right? You see, the changes are not so obvious across one value to another, in the same way that they're not terribly obvious from one value to another here. But over the course of the whole strip, it's very obvious. So that's kind of neat. All right, let's keep going with this. So the idea always is a nice sharp pencil. So I took a fresh, nicely sharpened pencil. Look at that. It's like you would seriously hurt yourself with that. It's very sharp. So definitely take care. And then again, that's that AFMAT long pointed sharpener, electric sharpener, which is great, right? Okay. So everything from 4, the center of 4 to the center of 5 is definitely at least 4. So I'm beginning to lay it in. All right, and again, that sound of the pencil on the paper is just so nice. Right, the whole thing is just such a rich experience. All right, and so the sound, right, of the paper and the pencil. But then you can feel a slight vibration of the pencil in your hand. That's pretty cool. Can you feel that? It's just a slight vibration. But then you also feel the pressure of your fingers on the pencil itself. And like, as I just became aware that I was of it, I realized I was gripping the pencil very tightly. And now I'm just consciously loosening that grip a little bit. It's not really necessary to hold the pencil so tight. And in fact, I think we have slightly less control when we're gripping too tight, right? Like that makes a lot of sense if, I don't know, you're holding something heavy, or I don't know, but it's so light, and it's a very light touch as we're getting into these lighter values. So a light touch, apparently, someone told me this story, that the Zen masters, when they're doing calligraphy, apparently at any given moment, if the teacher would walk by, he should be able to pull the brush out of the student's hand without there being the slightest bit of resistance. And I like that idea, right? So that we're only putting as much force as is necessary. And just like subtly, that's a nice idea. Like, just everything's so heavy-handed all the time. But what about that light touch? Where does that come in, right? No one wants to be gentle and slow down. Everyone wants to be fast and hyped. So I would like to be a little bit of that antidote on YouTube, right? So slow, quiet, non-hyped. Right? We need that. We really need that. And also, I'm not good at that hype stuff, right? So there are people that are great at that. And like they should totally do it. And I'm glad they are. And I find it exciting watching certain people on YouTube. But I want to be that, right? So just start spreading the word. This channel is all about chilling out, going slow, connecting with our senses, with what we're doing, and then ultimately with each other. Like, I want this community to eventually grow, so help me grow. That would be great. We'll grow together. And right, that we could just go slowly and surely from one thing to another, developing our skills. So that's the vision, putting it out there. Let me know what you think of these ideas. I mean, one of the things that I don't like about this part of the making the videos is that it's always very static, and there's no feedback, right? So one of the things I love about classes, like teaching weekly classes, which I do a bunch. You can see them all on my website if you want to take one. And also the academy, the Medici Art Academy, those monthly lessons, is that we come together and it's so alive, and it's so nice to engage and talk with you all, right? And the more we do that, and I think the more like you guys comment on the videos, like so far, I mean, it's going great. Thank you so much for like just the support. It's going great. And some people are commenting, but not enough. And so it's very hard for me to know if you guys are enjoying this, right? So definitely comment. Definitely take the workshops. 2 reasons for that. One is that it literally will help pay for this so that it continues. But 2, then we get this momentum rolling and flowing, and these lessons, then I kind of, in the back of my mind, I have all of your voices, and I have your faces kind of inspiring me to continue doing this, right? So that's like the best, right? That's just the best. So, and then we have that momentum for ourselves when we're working on these lessons, right? So that's the important thing, is a balance between this kind of static thing and then the live thing. All right, let me know what you think of all that. Okay, we have our 4. 4 is looking okay. It looks a little light still, doesn't it? Now, the thing that I'm liking more about the way I'm approaching the 4 is that I'm doing it a lot slower. I'm being a little more systematic with the passes across the square. So it's building up a little more evenly. That said, there's still some blotching happening. And look, the blotchy stuff, that's just bound to happen. So It's not like at a certain point we won't ever get it. You know, we're not printers, right? We're human, so it's just bound to be slightly irregular. Right, lean back, that's always the key. You see, so now I'm super aware that of what happened last time where it was too light. And I'm looking at this, and if I look at the white next to it, I begin to think that this is dark enough. But if I actually just compare this, if I kind of mentally block this part out, then I can totally see that it's way too light compared to the 4 up here. Not way too light, but certainly too light. It could definitely have a couple more passes. Also even it up a touch, right? This is a bit light through here. This is looking decent down here. We got definitely a light spot right here in the 5. So let's tidy that up a little bit. All right, let's see here. That 4 is looking better. If anything, almost a little dark, I would say. Just a little cheat here. Just a little bit of cheating. Just a little bit of rubbing it in with my finger, which technically is cheating. But you know, you got to know what the rules are and you got to know how to break them, but not too much. That just helped a little, take a little bit of the darkness off, but also even it up a touch. So that looks better. I would say that this is looking more like that 4. The 5 itself looks okay. They are a bit close, the 4 and the 5. I actually feel that this is a little too light, my gradient. Maybe one more pass. But it's particularly on the lower half. Yeah, that's a little better. A little bit light through here. Yeah, that's better. All right, that would make this a little darker. Okay, so our 5, we could just be a hair darker. Now we'll do the same thing. From the 5 to the line, we'll do one pass, full all across the whole thing. Then we'll go halfway, and that should be enough. One pass. We'll do another. Okay, there we go. Yeah, see, it's interesting at this point, right? That it's almost like from 4 to 6.5, 7, it's pretty similar. And then we get this being, yeah, I mean, it's a little darker. It feels like the 8 isn't dark enough, right? But see, you just don't see it until we get enough of the scale in. And again, we're not going to correct it now because we got to correct it with a similar process that's structured so that we don't just start changing everything, because that's the only thing that's worse than like giving up. Giving up's the only real problem. But second, another problem is, right, having a process that works most of the way through and then kind of losing it. So after hours of work, we kind of abandon it. That doesn't make too much sense. Well, let's see what happens when we put in the 3 and the 2. Because there's still a long way to go, right? When you look at this value to here, you know, it's still quite a jump. So let's see the effect on this. What I suspect will happen is that this will really start taking its own, and it will start to really look like the 4-5, right? Right now it just looks like it's grouping too much with the 5, 6, and 7. But once it's anchored to the light, a bit more, I think we're going to see it balance out a bit more. Right? This is why it's nice to always work systematically. Right? So same thing, right? From the 3 to the 4, we're definitely, everything is at least 3. And I'm thinking that there might be a little bit of grease on the paper from my hand, just because of the way the pencil is, it just slides across the surface a little more than I would want. So what I'm going to do is just work in the pencil, right? I don't like typically to do this because then we're kind of relying on smudging techniques, and that's a whole different thing, right? Like, we're doing it mechanically in the sense that we're creating the effect by controlling the pencil. Using stumps or blending, with your finger or paper or something, it's totally valid. It's just a different thing, right? And we'll definitely use that technique at some point, just not right now. That should help just work the pencil into the paper a bit, and then I can build it back up, right? Just as long as it's, it's a little lighter still than our 3. So the pencil should build up better now. Yeah, I can feel it gripping it a bit better. Right, again, that's one of the reasons to use a maul stick. In our case, a telescoping back scratcher works like a perfect maul stick, right? Or a piece of paper under your hand or a tissue to prevent yourself from smudging. But at this point, I can work around the paper. I don't have to be on it. The other thing you can also have is a pencil extender, if that helps. Okay, so we take a look here. 3, right? The idea being that 3 to 4, it's at least 3, so everything's 3 first. And looking at it, looks like it's all right. Maybe just a hair darker. But not much, really not much at all. Okay, so our 4 is here, right? Here's our center of our 4, the only true 4, right at the center of the value. As we go beyond it, we're getting closer to 5. Now, as we're coming towards the 3, we want to stop at the line because no part of 4 should be in the 3 area. So we'll do one pass out. Okay, good. I don't even think I need any more than that. Just, if anything, evening up what I just did. There we go. Okay. Yeah, not bad. Okay, same idea with 2 to 3. Everything from 2, the center of 2 to the center of 3 is at least 2. So we lay it in. You see, it's interesting, isn't it? How these values here, right? I was quite concerned that they were all just grouping too much, but now I'm beginning to see the gradient since I'm getting these in, and I think that effect will come even more when we get from 2 to 1 to, right? Now once we finish this off, I think this gradient is going to look a lot better than I think it does right now. Where, of course, I feel the urge to go and correct stuff. But again, working step by step by step, working that process all the way through. So this is the interesting part, right? So from 1 to 2, of course, everything is at least 1, but there's nothing there for 1. So there's really nothing we do from that point of view. But what we can do is we see 2 to the edge, right? So we can at least begin to fade this out. Right, so at this point, we may also find we might want to clean up some of the edges, certainly on the lighter side, just because it's going to help see that clear boundary against the white. I mean, again, we're going to do a whole kind of cleanup and refinement stage, so don't worry too much about that. It's just particularly around here where we're working right up against a white. It's kind of nice to have that nice clean border. So really I'm just trying to fade out from the center of the 2 to the 1. I am definitely finding that I have to rely on a bit of smudging, just because, partly because of the paper. I'm also realizing it might actually be this pencil, that it's just sometimes the lead can be a little hard. And if you're finding it scratching a little bit, it might be too hard. So just take another pencil. Okay, so our 3 is blending out to the line. That helps quite a bit. Now our 2 looks pretty decent. Our 2 blending to our 1 also looks pretty good. Let's make sure that there's nothing here in the whitest part, which would be right up against this line. So I'm already seeing that I can take off quite a bit, actually. I don't know if this will come across on camera, but it was surprisingly dark. So a little blending back over that line, a little selective erasing. Okay, that's the full process, or the first, part 1 and 2 of the whole process. We have our darks, our mids, and our lights. The scale is there, but it definitely needs some tweaks, right? It needs to be refined a little bit. The texture and pattern isn't bad, right? It's fairly consistent. My sense is that we're going to want to bring up some of our darks in this area a little bit. And we can do that easily with a little bit of evening up, because I'm still seeing some of the bands of the original values here, which means that the fill between wasn't dark enough, right? So totally going to bring that up. You can see the same thing here, the 4, the 5, the 6. I can still see a little bit of a band at the core of the value, which means that, again, the fill wasn't quite dark enough. So we'll bring that up as well, right? So that'll be the first step for the next lesson. We'll even it up, even the fills up. Then we're going to see what happens with that. That'll probably deal with some of the blemishes. But then we'll do another pass working on the blemishes. And then we'll take it from there. There'll probably be some refinement still to do, but we'll get pretty close. But isn't that cool? I mean, it's just like, it's a little daunting before you know how to do it. And then once you have a little bit of a process that can take you through it, you get through without totally wiping out, right? And that's the best part. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me. I'm looking forward to this whole year where we're working together, right? So I don't know if you read the fine print when you clicked this video. But the fine print says that you're committing for the entire year. So you can't back out on that now. It's just like, that's it. So we're in this together, and we got to see it through. Anyway, thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.